Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly.com. Habitly.com is where you go individually or as a team to learn better habits, how you behave with other people, how you manage your time, how you pursue goals. We've got great little short teachings that are animated. We also have longer teachings that can really help you improve your life and advance your career. Check it out at Habitly.com. Today's episode is with Wendy Swire. She is the founder of Swire Solutions. She's an author, speaker, applied neuroscience consultant, and she also calls herself a brain geek. But she is going to teach us how you catch that anger, how you stop that depression or that anxiety. She is a certified mental fitness coach. And this is fascinating. You're going to love it. Let's dive in. Wendy, you're the first person I've ever met that describes yourself as a brain geek. So you're doing some really interesting work with people, but why don't you start with the brain geek as an introduction and we go from there?
Yeah. First of all, David, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to speak with you and with your listeners.
Oh, thanks. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I call myself a brain geek because I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not a neuropsychologist. I am a business person. I'm an executive coach, a facilitator. I work with leaders. But in the last almost 12 years, my understanding and learning of the brain has been my hobby and my passion. So I am a proud geek. I'm self-taught, but it's taken me to become the founder of the DC Neuro Leadership Group, which is a study salon. I work with neuroscientists. I write about neuroscientists. And I have found, David, that the more you understand about your brain, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it explains so much behavior, why we get stuck in patterns, why your employees keep doing the same things. It just opens up a world. So I am known as someone who can translate pretty complex neuroscientists so every single person can use it.
Cool. What led you to this? You say you started the journey 12 years ago. What happened that led you down this path?
Sure. I love that question. So I think there's a couple things. I think what happened to me is I think like many people, probably yourself, many of your listeners, I was in a course, I was taking a class, I was in a coaching program at Georgetown, and the person speaking said something about the brain. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And let me share with you what this faculty member said. They said, when you are feeling a positive emotion, love, joy, appreciation, happiness, whatever, the brain cannot at the same time feel a negative emotion. So you can't be happy and angry. The brain cannot process being happy and angry at the same time. You can be happy and then quickly switch to anger. And for some reason, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I want to learn more. And then someone gave me a book and I had a little bit of brain science on it. And I was like, wow, that is really interesting. So thing one here is if you find anything moderately curious, like I want to learn more, follow that intuition. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin, if you want to learn more about something in technology, or if you want to learn more about being creative, just follow it. Don't worry about, well, I'm not an artist. I can't be creative.
So I've got two questions before you move on to the next one, because I'm built like a dinosaur, big body, small brain. So if I don't talk about it now, it's lost. So first of all, you talk about I can't be happy and angry at the same time. Or I heard someone talk about, which I'd be curious about your feelings on this too, that there's two major emotions. There's fear and there's love.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
With my methodology, I agree with that. The brain, what happens is every emotion is attached to a neurochemical. Those are really, really powerful brain chemicals that you have pulsing through your brain right now. They are incredible. And by the way, we all have, the brain is the most powerful information transfer system on the planet. Let me repeat that. There's nothing more powerful than your brain. Nothing. No piece of technology, the super collider in Switzerland, the space station, nothing is more powerful. And your brain's this little 3-pound mass of tofu. Okay. So basically, when you feel a negative emotion, it's going to pump out a chemical. And then when you feel a positive emotion, you're going to have dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. You're going to have different chemicals. When you're negative, you have a lot of cortisol and other chemicals. So you can't produce them. You can do it quickly. You can have cortisol, then dopamine, but you can't do it at the same time. So in mental fitness, we want to have more of those positive emotions. You train your brain to have more positive emotions.
Awesome. And then I love what you said, and we don't have to go too far down this if you want to, if you don't want to, because we really want to talk more about the brain stuff. But I loved where you said, if you have a curiosity, that you pursue it, because today in society, and I think globally to a large extent, we have a tremendous amount of people who see a soundbite and then all of a sudden they've come to a conclusion, they've got a judgment of someone else or whatever it might be, but they haven't peeled back the layers and they really don't understand the full data to make a decision based on the truth, based on the facts. They've just got one little piece. And I love what you say that, hey, pursue it and see where you get. And it sounds like when you went after this, it was so engaging. You just kept going and going and going. So,
yeah. And I mean, the other part of the story is at the time, and this is, it was a sad situation. My mother had just passed and I had lost my father. So I was a fairly young orphan.
Yeah.
All right. And by the way, I was a young parent at the time. So here I am holding it, a baby. I've just lost my mom. My father had passed, not too long ago. And I, clearly I was sad. I was grieving. And I don't think I was clinically depressed, but I was sad. I was grieving. So anything that would help me understand what I was going through, I wanted to understand. So I always, I'm an analyst by training. I come out of, I come out of Wall Street. Come out of finance. I'm an economist. So I want to understand. And again, I'm not out of biology or neuroscience, but I'm like, this is going to explain why I'm dealing with this challenging situation. And years later, I can tell you everything that you talk about, everything that I use in neuroscience, I've used for myself. There's nothing I'm going to share with you that I don't use for myself and with my corporate clients.
Yeah, I heard a woman speaker many years ago. I don't know whether it was Florence Littauer or whether it was somebody else, but she was the first person I heard say something like that, where she said, I want to let you know, everything I teach is something that I have learned and put into use myself. Otherwise, I'm not telling you. So you said there were two things that took you down this path. I interrupted you on the first one. What was the second thing?
Yeah, the second one was just personally, I want to understand why am I feeling so bad? And what can I do about it? How can I get out of it? So if anybody is going through a challenging time, and we know a lot of people are, either as a business leader in a family with a loved one, understand that some basic neuroscience will help you understand physically why you're feeling it, what's happening in your brain to make you feel this way. And, emotions, performance, they're all connected. They're all connected. Body and mind, and your performance and your outcomes are completely connected. So
I'm really interested because I know people who suffer from depression, from anxiety, from anger. And this is kind of top level though, but I'd love to go deeper. But so here I am. Let's say it's me. It's not me, by the way, in those things typically, but it can happen to anybody, right? But so if I'm a person that let's say I feel depressed. So you're saying I've got certain chemicals happening in the brain.
Yeah.
How do I stop?
Well, first thing I want to say, I'm not a professional psychologist. So if you think you're kind of feeling lousy, the first thing you do is you get help. There's no shame at all in any mental illness. Yeah. Because the brain is so complicated. If you are off on certain serotonin receptors, things that are so small, it can throw your brain off. Okay. Environment, stress. So there's no shame. I tell my clients all the time, 1 out of 6 people have anxiety. It's not a big deal. Okay. So we need to destigmatize it. The second you get professional help, and then you learn that, there's things happening with me in how I am processing emotions through these neurochemicals, how I'm managing stress, what part of the brain am I in? So what you do is, in the work that I do, I make referrals to therapists all the time. I'm like, this is out of I can't ski here. This is, but you can work on training, doing some brain training, mental fitness, to at least help strengthen the part of your brain, as you said, where you do have, we call it the sage brain, certain regions of your brain where you have more of these positive emotions. You can do that training, and it does work. I mean, the research on it is great, and it's work you have to do. So what I say, David, is, we learned about physical fitness, didn't we? Going to the gym and working out. I'm sure you look very fit. We eat healthy, we work out, we go to the gym, we lift weights. The brain is absolutely no different. It's a muscle it's an organ actually, but think about it as a muscle. You have to train and rep it and work it if you want to get the results. It's no different.
It's interesting when you talk about the repetition of the training and how that applies to so many different areas of us as individuals. So you brought up the physical, you brought up the brain. If we're on a spiritual journey, if we're doing that regular regimen, it brings us much deeper into understanding the truth of that. If we're even at work, the regimen of having what I call sanctuary time. So you're just like self-check, self-accountability. Am I focusing on what's truly most important? Relationships. If I'm having that regular time with my wife, spouse, for people, with kids, with neighbors, that type of thing. So much of our life seems to be that if we're investing that time, we're being more fulfilled or we're becoming stronger. And what you've uncovered is, it sounds like you have a program that helps us really develop the brain so we can live in this sage area. And people who aren't familiar with that term, sage, if I'm understanding the term, is a word that's used to describe someone who's got some wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I love the term. I love what you're saying. And yes, sage is really that part of your brain that has wisdom, kindness, joy. It's where your positive emotions, really. It's the part of your brain. In the methodology I use, positive intelligence, we call it the sage brain. It's a complicated network of your brain. We simplify the science, basically. But yeah, it's where all that good stuff lives. It's the part of your brain. Joy, happiness, creativity, empathy. You've got to access it because the brain has a built-in negativity bias. Okay.
That's interesting. Please talk about that for a moment.
Sure, of course. So, and I'll tell you a story about one of my leaders. I just got off the phone with him today in a moment. So your brain is wired to be negative. It's your primitive wiring. We've had the same brain structure for the last, as sapiens, 200,000 years. Your brain is wired to worry, look for threats, scan for threats, and be negative. That's your natural default state. So you're going to go there. And obviously, the brain is not wired for today's world. We're just not wired for the onset, like the onset of chronic, we're wired for acute stress. Right? But we're not wired for constant 24-hour news cycle, this and a pandemic. Your brain is just not designed for it. So by design. So essentially what you have to do is you don't get rid of the negative wiring. You don't get rid of it. You just want to strengthen. You want to strengthen using those muscles analogy. You want to start to build weights to create more positive neuronal connections. And they get stronger and stronger. So we're quieting the negativity bias. You start to quiet it and you strengthen up. So throughout the day, and I'll tell you, a story of my client, we'll call him, Tim. Tim is really successful, very successful, MVP, heading to an SVP at a large, Fortune company. Really smart, gets a lot of results, but still constantly is questioning himself throughout the day, all day long. Is this good? He has a hypervigilant saboteur. He's a stickler. He's a perfectionist. He's a hyperachiever. So that part of the brain, and he, again, as you said, not spending enough time refreshing. He works out. He's like a triathlete. Happily married. He's got all that, but he's constantly doubting himself. So we're working on, look, is that serving you? What part of the brain are you in? And so he's so that constant triggering. So because he's doing mental fitness work, he can see, I'm in this meeting. I'm judging this person. I'm judging myself. I'm constantly criticizing. The noise starts to go down. You do this work in real time. It's not hypothetical work. It's not reading a book. You actually do the work in real time. So Tim's starting to notice, like, wow, I can see my worst critic is myself. It's myself. So
yeah,
that's not going to fuel performance, the highest level performance.
Interesting. I met a guy years ago, and what he called it is the negativity committee in his brain.
That's it. So what do you do with the committee? How do you stop them? How do you quiet them and get the sage and get the more supportive, creative, engaging, kind, empathetic committee in your brain?
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of teaching people how to put up some boundaries within their brain to hold off the hordes.
Yeah.
The saboteur. I like the term saboteur. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So what we do in mental fitness is it's the ratio of throughout the day of the positive versus the negative emotion. So as you're listening right now, your listeners, if you're driving, if you're, on the treadmill, whatever it is, just this work is very much, actually, it's in your body. It's very connected to the work in your body, because body mind is connected. But basically, what's your state right now? Where are you? And what we do is we want to increase the ratio of when you are in that sage positive portion of your brain versus the negative saboteur brain. The saboteur is a region of your brain that is the one that really is the judge. We call it the judge, judging yourself, judging others 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
Just constantly judging. And then there are 10 accomplice saboteurs that show up that really put you in that more negative critical space. Things like being a hyperachiever, being a stickler, a perfectionist, a victim. Are you a people pleaser? If you're in these patterns of behavior, you think they're helping you. They're not. They're keeping you in your saboteur brain.
Fascinating. So I'm very interested with. So first of all, I think I have found that people's life experience contributes to the number of people on the negativity committee or the saboteur and their 10. But also the intensity. Would you agree with that? And whether you agree, disagree, can you comment on that?
David, I think that's a very wonderful insight. Your history, your background, a lot of things from childhood, a lot of your circumstance will determine that negative, are you in sage or saboteur? And I just want to share, and we'll talk about this probably towards the end. There's a little assessment you can take. Takes less than 5 minutes. It's free. And it's going to be on the landing page for listeners of your podcast, where you can learn what your saboteurs are. So there's an assessment that I want to encourage everyone to take. It's wonderful to see this. But of course, absolutely, your life determines so much of your past, because that's when the neuronal wiring gets set.
Yeah.
And so that's where those voices start to come from. This isn't good enough. Usually it's something, I'm not something enough. From
Yes.
man, I'm not strong enough, smart enough, powerful enough, woman, I'm not nice enough. So we have a lot of stereotypes too. So absolutely, you've made an excellent point. I fully agree.
Well, and I also like your comment that the physical is connected to the mental, because I've noticed that when I get tired, I am much more prone to let the hordes attack. I become more depressed. So like this morning, I was tired this morning. It's getting towards the end of the week. I've had an extremely busy week. I haven't gotten enough sleep. I'm just speaking candidly. And so I was under attack this morning. My wife went off to an early yoga class. When she came back, I checked in before the podcast, and I just said, yeah, I'm kind of under attack. I think I'm just really tired, getting a lot of negative messaging. And so if I'm in that position, what would you be telling me to do as far as how do I hold these hordes off, or saboteurs, whatever, kind of like the saboteurs, almost like ninjas coming in a group attacking with nunchucks and whatever.
That's
So
what they're doing. They're coming after you in your brain, and you're not even aware that they're there. Yeah.
Well, I have gotten the awareness. And for me, I can be pretty good now at, kind of shifting my focus, trying to do small tasks to just move beyond it, or I do some exercise or whatever. But if you were working with someone, what might be one approach that you would suggest that if someone starts getting attacked on the depression side, so you're not good enough, you're not doing a good enough job, you're failing in this, blah, 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 what would you be coaching them to do?
So a couple things I would do. So the first thing I do for some of my executives like Tim and some of my other leaders who really want to dive deep, I do help my clients go through what we call a 7-week boot camp on this, intensive training on this, where you are focusing on it throughout the day. And it's done through an app on the phone. And if people are interested, they can reach out and, share more about the boot camp. But essentially, when you catch yourself, what we say is a negative emotion has a use. There's nothing wrong with being a negative. You were kind of cranky today, David. That meant, hey, I'm tired. I'm not getting enough sleep. That's good information for you. If you're feeling a little angry or frustrated, it is good. Negative emotions have a place. What we say in the methodology is, if you put your hand on a hot stove, that's good. And you burn yourself, that's good information, right? Don't do it. If you but if you keep your hand on the hot stove for more than 2 seconds, that's not good. Negative emotions are no different than the hot stove. If you stay in the negative emotion is there, right? The physical reactions happen. Do you stay in it? And how do you get your hand off the hot stove? That's the key. Yep. How do you move it? So the techniques you do are very, very simple, because that way you can remember them. You quickly move into something quickly in your body. So for the listeners right now, literally wiggle your toes. If you do something physically in your body, and you can do it with me too, David, you wiggle your toes. You literally rub your fingers together like I'm doing. Okay, so take 2 fingers and rub the fingertip ridges so carefully. Can you feel the fingertip ridges? Feel the ridges of your fingers.
Okay.
Sounds super simple. It is. By doing that, when you move into something physically, then you can move out of that negative, your hands off the hot stove. Okay. I often tell clients, hold a pencil, hold something, right? Physically, you want to feel something. And by doing that, hold anything, grab a pencil and just literally grab a rubber band. By doing that, feel the pencil. And you're like, oh, I'm sure you're thinking, this is kind of crazy. It's so simple. It doesn't, by doing that, you've shifted the pattern, and now you can make a different choice. I don't want to be in that negative. I want to shift my thought patterns. I'm noticing that judge. I'm judging someone in a meeting. I'm judging Bill in the meeting and Susan in the meeting. That's not helping me. All right. Let me catch it. Breathing is probably the best. You're going to breathe anyways. Breathing calms the sympathetic nervous system. So just take a deep breath. Things that grandma told you, right? Just breathe, drink water. Water will flush your cortisol, which is the neurochemical. So it's 4 or 5 simple things that you do that, and then you can shift. And in the Sage Brain, there's 5 techniques that we use. Once you've made that shift, you've got 4 or 5 alternatives of moving into Sage Brain.
Interesting. So it's interesting, and for the audience who's not watching the video but listening on audio, which is the majority of our audience, I was doing those different things. So when I put my fingers together and started focusing simply on the fingertips, it wasn't putting my hands together that really did it, but it was focusing on kind of circling my fingertips against one another. It stopped my brain from thinking of anything else. And yet I'm focusing on something so simple.
Yeah, that's what's so cool. That's what's so cool about this work, why I've been doing it intensively for the last 3 years. I'm studying with the founder of it. I am so jazzed on it because I've done it in the middle of the pandemic and I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've been studying neuroscience. I've taken every professional development. I'm a coach. I mean, I know all the techniques, right? This methodology is so practical in real time. That's why I love it. You don't have to be meditating. You can do it right when you're triggered. You can literally take those fingertips, take a deep breath, but you train yourself over and over, and then you can shift. It's good stuff. I have seen profound results with my clients and with myself. I was getting triggered like crazy during the pandemic. Everyone was home. My son, a girlfriend, another son, the dogs, we got a puppy. And I was terrified, and I was judging and judging and judging. I'm like, this is not going to work. It was not going to work. So I started this work during pandemic.
Interesting. So that brings me to, how do I catch the trigger? So one of the habits, and I'm just using myself, I'm not a good example because, but some people get a trigger, can be for depression, can be anxiety, can be anger based on what's happened. And, but the trigger clicks. And then to use your analogy, I put my fingers on the hot stove and I just leave them there. They're just stuck.
Yeah.
And then whatever that emotion is gets more and more intense because I'm validating, that I am afraid or I am angry or I am what. How do I, when the emotion doesn't start as a trickle, when the trigger happens, it's a rush. So for instance, I was working with a group of, I'm working for a company right now. I'm consulting with them and I'm on contract through next December. So I'm managing 100 or 110 people. About 60 of them are in India. So I was over in India back in October and I had a very intensive schedule, which was my fault, not theirs. And I trained, there's 3 groups of people that are doing the frontline IT support. Mm-hmm. I trained all their people 3 times, once each day that I was in the office. When I got to the 3rd day, one of the people said that they had somebody else, not in that office, who had bullied them on the phone. And that employee that they were talking about no longer with the company, but bullied them. And Wendy, I immediately got mad. So I have a trigger if you go after my family. Okay. And I immediately got mad. And because they've given me a VP title, I just said, hey, if that ever happens again, nobody's ever going to bully anybody on my team. So you talk to your boss and you also copy me. And I will be on it in an instant. But I was like, boom.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like ready to punch somebody or something because I've never been in a fight, but except when I played water polo. But I was just instantly there. And but other people, when they get triggered, it's like they've gone off the waterfall.
Wow. Well, first of all, good for you. What good leadership you shared with the team. And I've been listening to your podcast on leadership. So, so a couple things. One is I'm going to encourage everyone, take that little saboteur assessment and at least give language to it. So that's thing 1. Okay. Let's call it what it is. I have a trigger where you have to know your triggers. So there is a little bit of, you have to want to do this work. Okay. You really do. You have to want to say, I'm tired of beating myself up and being so critical. I'm tired of being a perfectionist. I'm tired of feeling like, hyperachiever. It's never enough. Like I'm ready to quiet this because I want to increase my performance. I want more positive emotions in my life. So that's thing 1. You have to want to do it.
Yeah.
Thing 2 is, take that assessment and you'll get access. Everyone on your listeners will get access to it. The third thing is it really happens in your body. So this stuff happens. The brain works so fast. That automatic negative place is super, super fast. It is way faster than your thinking brain. So people call it the reptile brain. So you've got to be able to say something, I can feel it. So where are your triggers? Is it in your shoulder? Do you get a little bit of headache? Is it in your stomach? Let's start to pay attention to our somatic cues. That is data you want to observe. All right. Third thing, have people help you with this. For our leaders and, our business leaders who are listening, have someone say, did I get triggered? What are you noticing? If you're not sure, then have loved ones tell you. They'll tell you, but you got to look for the clues. And then you just start to notice, just ask yourself, am I staying in anger more than a couple seconds? As my hand on the hot stove, just ask yourself that question. And I put that in my book. It's in my book. What part of my brain am I in? Am I in that negative brain or more of that positive brain? Just by asking that simple question, you're going to reflect. You want to kind of step back and reflect. So this stuff takes work. It's just like, if you want to work out, we're recording this in the new year. If you want to work out, you're not going to hit the gym and start lifting dead weights of 100. You're going to start small. This stuff just takes work and work and work. But you will start to create new wiring in the brain within 6 or 7 weeks.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. So it's not like, I have to do it, but you have to, it's just like, we're always going to stay physically fit. The wiring will start to happen. The dendrites will start to grow, and the new neuronal pathways take about 6 or 7 weeks.
That's great. And I think you should get all your clients to say new neuronal pathways really fast 3 times. So this is really interesting. So if I'm hearing you correctly, so if I notice I'm getting triggered, one thing I can do is breathe deeply.
Yes.
Put my fingers together, massaging like the fingertips, maybe drink water. That's a new one. I haven't heard that before. Get some fluid going.
Yeah, water's a superpower. I'll tell you why. So if you say, someone asks, you're in a meeting and they say, David, what's the justification of this? Or they ask you kind of a question and you're like, whoa. If you take a sip of water, it takes about 10 milliseconds to move from that negative part of your brain to the positive part of your brain. 10 milliseconds it doesn't sound like a long time. In brain science, it's a long time. A little sip of water, a sip of coffee. That's an interesting question. You can now start to calm that sympathetic nervous system and move into sage. You need to buy time, basically. You want to buy time to get there. So water, to me, also, when you are in that saboteur negative brain, you're pumping out all of that negative cortisol, a really, really powerful and often toxic neurochemical. If it stays in your body, you need to flush it out with water. You should be water, forget about your health, but water for your brain. If you want to be at peak performance for your brain is something like 70% water. You need water just to think.
Wow. But what about, now another component of this is my experience, like somebody has anxiety. So when they're triggered into their anxiety, which is, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, whatever it might be. Sometimes I'm successful. Other times I'm not successful when I try to help the person. And I'm speaking personally, not professionally, because I don't deal with anxiety professionally. But sometimes it's like, well, you just don't understand. This is just the way I am. Blah, blah, blah. And it's a wall. So I don't know whether I'm more interested in what I can do differently, but I'm also interested in what that person can do differently if they're feeling that way, should they take a moment to be by themselves, kind of practicing what you're saying of getting some physical motion, breathing deeply, drinking some water, maybe going for a walk or something? Or is there another approach they should take if they feel like they're locked in and those saboteurs just have them surrounded and, hey, this is just the way it is?
Yeah, well, look, this is a 2-part answer. One, if someone really is incapacitated because of anxiety, depression, trauma is a big issue now. Look, as a coach, I make referrals all the time. Like this is something like, hey, you seem kind of really worked up about this more than, I listen a lot, and I've heard almost everything. I've worked with, thousands of leaders. So
I'm sure.
So I will say, look, I will listen, but maybe this is something you should think about. And then some people, nope, I'm fine. Well, of course, that's a coping mechanism, right? We don't need to be a psychologist and no, okay, fine. The second, it's an invitation. I'm always, and again, leaders, coaches, I invite you. Are you interested in trying to work on this? Yes or no? And if they want to, great. And if not, they are always my clients. You are always in choice. You're always in choice, when I work with executives. So it's like, hey, I've got some cool stuff on brain science. I've got mental fitness boot camp. I've got some other stuff. I've got some simple techniques. Are you curious? It's an invitation. If they're like, okay, then I go there. All right. And then those simple things, like, let's just do a couple things. So I work with someone, he was at the White House a couple administration ago. I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area. And he had a temper. He was dealing with a very, very senior person who's known to have a temper. And he was getting really frustrated. And I'm like, you can't get frustrated. This person is like the number 2, right? You can't do that at the White House. You can't, and what he said is, what we learned is that he was skipping lunch. He wasn't eating properly. And at 3:00, his temper. So we look for patterns. When did the anger show up? Sure enough, he was really hungry. He was just really hungry. So what we did as a coach is every day at 3:00, and I taught a little bit of brain science. I said, look, your brain is really, really tired. That's why you want a Red Bull, you want a coffee. It's because your brain is cognitively fatigued because it's been working so hard. At 3:00, no matter what, he had an apple and a power bar and a bottle of water.
Yeah.
And guess what? Mood changed. He wasn't getting triggered. He had a big staff. So little things like that, before you get on the Zoom, before you walk into the meeting, do a box breath. That's what the Navy SEALs do. Just breathe 3 times in, 3 times out. Guess what? That stuff works. You have to do it. But so there's little teeny things you can do between meetings, drinking water, feeling your toes, feeling, it looks like you're standing, David, feel the weight of your feet on the floor. So yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah, Wendy, this is fascinating stuff. I'd love to keep going for another couple hours, but both of us have other commitments. I'm going to look into more of your stuff. I may be referring some people to you also. I think this is very helpful to them. I think it's very eye-opening. And so if people want to go on their own and learn more about what you're doing, why don't you talk a moment about your book and then where they can go to learn more?
Sure, absolutely. So I would welcome anybody. I've created, my team's created a special landing page for listeners of the podcast. So you can always Google Wendy Swire. I'm the only one that comes up, and Swire Solutions, SWIRE Solutions is my company. But if you're interested, and I'm sure in the show notes it will be here, but it's https swiresolutions.com manage to win. So there's a special landing page, swiresolutions.com -manage to win. On that, you can take the Saboteur assessment. You can learn a little bit more about positive intelligence, mental fitness. What is this that I'm talking about? These little simple techniques. Yeah, they do work. Don't be fooled. You can learn more about my coaching. But my book is a coaching book. It's anyone can learn to coach and ask those questions. It's called Anytime Coaching. And that's available on Amazon. And it's really about how anyone can learn some of these basic coaching skills. You don't have to go to Georgetown or go through the coaching programs. There's simple methodology. It's a simple model of how can I incorporate coaching in my life, in my work, with my family.
And is this coaching based on what you've learned about the brain, or coaching in
There's
general?
some brain science. Yeah, there's some brain. I'm very proud to say my publisher, when we did the second edition, it's not a neuro coaching book.
Okay.
That book I haven't written yet. But no, we do have we have some simple brain science in the second edition that talks about these 2 regions of the brain. And there's very simple exercises about what you can do to see positive possibilities. In my book, I call it it's chapter 2, seeing positive possibilities. You want to rewire your brain to see the positive and override the negative. That's what we're doing.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Wendy. This has been a great value to our audience and me. I've loved it.
What fun. Keep doing it. David, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun and a real privilege.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you got something from this interview with Wendy. I thought it was great. Please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. We love the feedback. And please don't forget our sponsor, Habitly.com, that can really help you learn better habits as you're reworking the wiring in your brain to choose the positive, the sage brain that Wendy was talking about. And again, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. We got more great guests coming. Bye for now.